Delighted that you're all here today to hear from Senator Banks. This is our series on the future of conservative foreign policy. We've had a couple of your colleagues, Senator Cotton, Senator Ernst, a couple of people who then went into the administration, Bridge Colby, Jamison Greer, who was on our advisory board. And so we're delighted to have Senator Banks as the next one. A word about Senator Banks. He's Hoosier born and bred, first in his family to go to college and educated at Indiana University. He served in the state Senate from 2010 to 2016, but not in consecutive years, because he was given a leave in 2014 and 15 to serve in the Navy in Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. Came back, ran for Congress, and served 4 terms. Was on the Armed Services Committee, the Select Committee on China, and after those 4 terms ran for the Senate and was elected just now in November. And he serves on the Banking Committee, Veteran Affairs Committee, and as in the House, the Armed Services Committee, and is a leading voice on conservative foreign policy. And that's what we're going to talk about today, although I have to say that I think as I look at what you've done in these short months, I think my favorite may be the one you sponsored, S746, the Defund NPR Act. Speaking for myself, Vandenberg has no position. So please join me in welcoming Senator Banks.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be with all of you. Thank you, Elliott, for that great introduction. Carrie, great to be with you. And big fan of the important work that comes out of this organization. I get the emails and I read every one of them.
Thank you.
So thank you for providing that and other resources to me and my team and so many others on Capitol Hill. You asked me to come today to talk about the future of conservative foreign policy. And I know we're going to get to a question and answer section here in a moment that will probably be more enlightening than anything that I have to say now might be, but I did want to share a few thoughts to try to answer the question that you asked me to come and speak about. When I think about the future of conservative foreign policy, I start with acknowledging that the Republican Party today is a much different Republican Party than it was when I first got to Capitol Hill in 2016. In 2021, right after President Trump left office, I wrote a memo to then Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, and I talked about what we need to do to cement the Republican Party as the party of the working class. And when I gave him that memo, that was long before, it was right after President Trump left office the first time, and long before any of us fully grasped the idea that he might run again and very well might win again in 2024. So in that memo, I talked about the values of the working class voter, the coalition that President Trump brought to our party that wasn't with us before. And Elliott talked about my background a little bit. I'm the son of a union factory worker and a nursing home cook. So this very much hits close to home for me. I mean, I think about my dad. My dad is often my test case, my focus group, if you will, for American politics. And he for most of his life was, he's still alive, but for most of his working life was a union Democrat who voted for whoever the unions told him to vote for who was supporting the working man. He really didn't like Republicans. I joke sometimes, but it's actually half true. He was only excited about 2 candidates that I could ever remember, and I wasn't one of them. The first one was Ross Perot for president. We had the Perot for president bumper sticker on his pickup truck, and at the time I was a little embarrassed about it as a budding young Republican. But the other one was Donald Trump. My dad was for Donald Trump the moment he came down the escalator, and at the time I told my dad, I said, I think you're crazy about this. My dad ended up being very, very, very right about President Trump and what he stood for. But my dad was for him from day one. It took me a little bit longer to get there, but the memo that I gave Kevin McCarthy sort of explores this idea of what the Republican Party looks like at that point after Trump. Now we have President Trump back again, and I think foreign policy has a lot to do with it. So I want to start with that. So last week, during the recess, Ruben Gallego and I visited Europe on a short CODEL. We're both 45. He's an Iraq war veteran. I'm an Afghanistan war veteran. We both served in the House together. We disagree about all kinds of things, but we also agree about a lot of things too. So we went to Europe, and so I have some fresh thoughts from that CODEL. It was a short CODEL because we both have young kids, and our wives would murder us if we were gone for more than 5 days. So we got back as fast as we could. And I want to share a little bit about that too. But I believe that the future of conservative foreign policy is rooted in what we know has worked in the past, and that's peace through strength. And I believe what President Trump has, what he stands for and his foreign policy is deeply rooted in Reagan-era peace through strength as well. My message in Europe last week, when I was with Ruben, we visited Slovakia, a little bit different of a perspective, but we spent a lot of time in Germany, and then we ended up in London. And my message to Europe was we have to expect Europe to step up to the plate and do more to focus on what's going on in Russia so that America can focus more on what's going on in China. And I want to get into that a moment too. Europe has to focus more on Russia and Ukraine. And America has to focus more on China. And my message in Germany and in London was that China is a threat to Europe too. And the more that America can focus on that threat, the better off we're all going to be in the end run. Because those threats affect us, I believe, equally in big ways. An America First foreign policy means that we want America to be the most prosperous and secure country in the world, and that average working class Americans will share in that prosperity. I've long said that America can't lead abroad in the way that many of us want it to and expect it to, and historically that America has, if America is weak at home. And I think our future of American foreign policy is rooted in that concept. The old GOP foreign policy establishment failed because the American people don't support forever wars with unclear goals and no clear metrics for success. I want to emphasize that. The old GOP foreign policy wasn't working because we were supporting a trade system that made us less prosperous at home and more dependent on our enemies abroad. President Trump, I believe, figured this out more than any president, certainly in my lifetime, maybe way beyond, because he's the first president. I love, like all of you, I love to read about history. I believe he's the first president in modern times that understands that our trade policy is national security policy. In this Trump administration, a conservative foreign policy means rebuilding our national strength and restoring our sovereign freedom of action. And under President Trump's leadership, we're putting China in its place, securing the border, and rebuilding the Made in America economy, getting back to those working class voters and the background that I come from. I want to share with you just 10 quick thoughts, and then Carrie, I'll take the hot seat and we'll take some questions and answers. So the future of conservative foreign policy, I believe, is rooted in these 10 thoughts that I've scribbled down that some of it might be related or might not. We can unpack it more later. First of all, the defense industrial base. The most important thing that Congress can do is help rebuild our defense industrial base. In World War II, places like Indiana were at the heart of the arsenal of democracy. General Motors made tens of thousands of tanks and plane engines in Indianapolis. We made hundreds of large landing ships at shipyards on the Ohio River and that saw service on D-Day and in the Pacific. In the Cold War, GM invented what is today the most important rare earth magnet, and they made it in Indiana. But in the 1990s, we sold it off to a Chinese shell company And today, communist China uses its rare earth dominance against us. Second, shipbuilding. We can't deter China without rebuilding our Navy, and we can't rebuild our Navy without a strong shipbuilding base. The President has made restoring American shipbuilding one of his major initiatives with the executive orders, and there are many of us in Congress who are looking at ways that we can legislate his executive order into permanence and look for long-term solutions. When I recently met with the new Secretary of the Navy in my office, he told me that he often gets text messages from President Trump at all hours of the day and night with pictures of aging ships and old shipyards and asking when that will be fixed. And he got those text messages before he was even confirmed. He kept telling President Trump, I'm not even on the job yet, so you got to give me a little bit of time. Luckily, the Midwest has enormous manufacturing capacity and capability and a whole lot of talent to solve this problem. The administration should use the Midwest to fix the shipbuilding crisis. We have the ecosystem to help to do it. We gave away our shipbuilding industry 40 years ago. This is the year that we start to take it back and put American shipbuilders back to work. Third, increase our defense budget. We need to seriously increase the defense budget and reform defense acquisition. President Trump is totally right about this. We need the Golden Dome for America and the investment that's going to come with that. We can only field new capabilities like the Golden Dome if we increase our defense budget and streamline the acquisition system. And my bill, I think it was the first bill that I introduced, or maybe the second bill that I introduced, Buying Faster Than the Enemy Act, will rapidly accelerate defense acquisition by letting DoD buy weapon systems the same way that the private sector does. Fourth, pro-industrial policy. I'm for industrial policy, but I'm not for another boondoggle like the CHIPS Act. I want to explain what I mean by that. The CHIPS Act took a real national security need, fixing DoD's dependence on foreign chip manufacturers, and turned it into a blue state bailout. The program got sidetracked by woke priorities and undermined the whole point of the bill and wasted a whole lot of money and time. And the worst part is that we allowed so much of the CHIPS Act funding to go to China because the Biden administration refused to put guardrails on where that money would be spent and what companies it would go to. Fifth, we got to focus on the China supply chain. Economic interdependence with communist China won't prevent war, it means war. The more that we rely on the CCP for manufacturing and supply chains in strategic sectors, the more likely that there will be a war and the more likely that we will lose it. In 2022, we paused delivery of the F-35s because they used rare earth metals from China. We can't expect to win a war if a plane that makes up half of our Air Force relies on Chinese parts. Sixth, malign foreign influence. We need to act decisively to root out malign foreign influence in our society. Whether it's Code Pink or the CCP operatives working in the New York governor's office, we got to force these foreign agents to register. Our universities can't keep taking billions of dollars in funding from enemy nations while taking billions of dollars from our own military for defense research. And then pro-Hamas and other anti-Semitic rioters, especially those on student visas, have no place in our country and we should kick them out. Seventh, China and Indo-PACOM. An America First foreign policy requires a focus on countering China first. Last year, the Indo-Pacific Command had the most unfunded priorities in its history at $11 billion. This means that our most important combatant command had the worst shortfall in resources, and that's totally unacceptable. We're not devoting nearly enough resources in the Pacific to counter China, and that has to change, and it will change with this administration and Republican majorities in the House and the Senate. Eighth, the U.S. posture in Europe. We need to get our European allies to focus on Russia more so that we can focus more on China, who is also their enemy. We can and should draw down U.S. forces in Europe, but we should not give away our air or naval bases in Europe at the same time. The Ramstein Air Force Base is an American sovereign asset. It enables us to protect our interests and project American power in crisis. The role of Supreme Allied Commander of NATO should always remain in American hands. And I'll tell you, being in Europe last week, that's exactly what they want, and it's in our best interest too. An America First foreign policy means U.S. troops serving under American, not foreign commanders. There's a difference between reducing our burden in Europe and giving up strategic bases and influence in Europe at the same time. That's why Greenland is so important to President Trump. It's why he's talking about it, because he understands the strategic value of Greenland and the natural resources that come from it and that position in the world, I believe, more than any president that we've heard in recent years ever talk about that part of the world. We have stationed troops in Greenland since World War II and have a Space Force base there today. Ninth, Ukraine. I support the president's effort to find a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. I think there were a lot of mistakes that were made from the outset of the war. Of course, there were mistakes leading up to the war that could have prevented it altogether if there was a truly a strong president and a peace through strength American foreign policy, but there wasn't. The American people do not and did not support Joe Biden's policy of costly commitments to Ukraine that never promised real success. The blank check approach didn't work. It didn't win over the American people. And those mistakes have already been made. We can't repeat those mistakes. And President Trump's path, and I believe his rhetoric of being tough on both sides, bringing them to the table and try to bring lasting peace to Ukraine is really important. And I believe that's in America's best interest. 10, and my last quick point, Iran. We must not accept another bad deal in Iran. I don't think that the president is even slightly interested in returning to an Obama-era-like Iran deal. We should never forget that President Trump's maximum pressure campaign in his first term brought the Iranian regime to its knees. And he did it without getting us into a full-blown war with Tehran. Israel's victories last year put Iran in a weaker position than it's been in decades. And the president knows that he holds all the cards and he knows how to play them. He is also the most pro-Israel president that we've ever had. So I fully expect him to put America and Israel's interests first when it comes to dealing with Iran. Together, I believe that these principles will restore American strength and make us more secure. We're already seeing President Trump implement this foreign policy across the board. As I said a little bit ago, understanding that trade policy is national security policy, it's really important to talk about what is happening at the moment and the way that President Trump is reorienting the global economy to diminish China's role in the world and to elevate America and our allies' role in the world. And I think the biggest news that, frankly, I don't think is getting enough attention, I wish a lot more people would talk about it, is Apple announcing that they're pulling out iPhone manufacturing out of China and moving it to India. I mean, this in and of itself is a major announcement that shows that these tariffs and the economic approach, the tough on China approach by President Trump, is weakening China right before our eyes. For Indiana, the next Honda Civic is going to be made in my home state, not in Mexico, which has been China's partner in pushing illegal fentanyl into our country. Eli Lilly and whole lot of other pharmaceutical companies are moving their production out of China, making major announcements about returning a lot of that production to the United States. These are major wins that are really good news for America and really bad news for China. And then just coming back from Germany last week, Germany going in, passing a constitutional amendment to go into debt to increase their defense spending is a direct result of President Trump's actions. I could keep going on and on about the good news that comes from all this, but I do want to share a fair warning, a little bit of caution that I've thought about as well as I ramble for just one more moment. The future of conservative foreign policy is rooted in realism, not isolationism. It is, I believe, pejorative, offensive even to working class Americans to call them isolationists just because you from time to time disagree with them about their thoughts about Ukraine or other parts of the world. It's counterproductive. It doesn't help our cause to as we usher in this new approach to foreign policy, which is really the old approach to foreign policy and being realistic about America's role in the world. We are $37 trillion in debt. And this new Republican coalition that gave President Trump a historic mandate, the popular vote win that he won in 2024, they expect those mechanics, those factory workers, those teachers, those police officers, they want to know that this president or any future president or Republicans in the House and the Senate are putting their livelihoods and their interests first over the rest of the world. And when we can articulate why we're doing what we're doing around the world, this peace through strength approach is important to them, that's when we're winning. So with that, Carrie, it is an honor to be here. I'm happy to take the hot seat and answer other questions that you have for me.
Great, thank you. So maybe I'll start, you shared a little bit about your personal background, your family background. I'll start with just one question that dives into that a little bit more, which is basically your service in Afghanistan. So one of the main critiques of the way things have operated, and you mentioned this in your remarks, is the establishment and this idea of sort of forever wars. You were involved in what some people refer to as a forever war, 20 years in Afghanistan. How did your service in Afghanistan influence your sort of policy ideas once you entered Congress?
I am the most, somebody told me this the other day, I am the most recently deployed member of the United States Senate. And when you look at the average age of the United States Senate, I suppose that's not shouldn't be a surprise to any of you. I mean, Ruben.
They all served in World War I, right?
So, but to that point, I deployed to Afghanistan right before I was elected to the House. I was there in 2014, 2015, and at that point, I mean, it was a fascinating experience for me. I mean, my military service pales in comparison to many of you and others who have served. I served in the Navy Reserves. I did my initial training. I was a supply corps logistics officer in the Navy Reserves and was immediately deployed to Afghanistan at that stage in the war as a foreign military sales officer. So I knew a little bit about what was going on from that, to answer your question, from that perspective, when the debacle happened with the pullout early in the Biden administration, and I've talked to, I served on the House Armed Services Committee, and I've hammered all of the Pentagon leadership and others questions about why this happened, but that we would retreat from the country and leave all of that valuable equipment behind. I mean, it's one of the biggest, I think, military mistakes in American history. So I knew a little bit about that because as a foreign military sales officer, I was on the front end and the back end of acquiring that equipment and watching. I mean, when I was in Afghanistan, we had two large parking lots on the outskirts of Kabul that were filled with ground-wheeled vehicles and big everything from medical supplies and the worst. I mean, one of the worst aspects of it was, and it was my unit that handled all of this, all of the night vision goggles. I mean, the things that gave us a strategic advantage over the Taliban and the enemy in the country, that we left all of it behind without destroying it, without trying to return it home. And there were so many mistakes that were made there that I hope we're learning lessons from, but I'm not convinced of it because nearly 4 years later, I mean, still no one's been held accountable. There's been no real investigation. There's been no real report about the mistakes that were made and what we're not going to do again. So that's to answer your question. That colors my perspective. Hopefully, we never get ourselves into another war that lasts for 20 years. That you're just on an annually spinning your wheels with no metrics or no real outcome that further diminishes America and our role in the world.
So you spoke a lot about peace through strength, and this is a phrase, obviously, that President Trump has used many times as well. I will say, though, that there are some who, not President Trump himself, but supporters of President Trump, let's call them loud media voices, who maybe disagree with you on a few things. For example, they'll agree with you that we need to focus on China, but will say we shouldn't actually care about what's going on in Iran. Israel's a friend, but we shouldn't put ourselves at risk to defend them. So how would you sort of respond to those voices that maybe agree half with what you're saying, but would suggest that we shouldn't have any role in the Middle East and shouldn't be concerned about Iran?
Well, I mean, first of all, Israel is our most important ally in the world, and we stand with them. But it's in America's interest to stand with them. and because Israel is the greatest catalyst for peace in a very dangerous part of the world. And we saw the outcome of that going back to September 11th of what it looks like when we're not engaged or when we're not trying to engage those enemies abroad so we don't face them at home. And I think most Americans get that. But I will say, I believe President Trump stands firmly in support of Israel and their interest. He understands the Iran threat. That's why he's trying to do something about it. That's why he's been historically tough on them. As I said in my rambling remarks, I mean, the maximum pressure campaign in the first term was very effective, and we saw the opposite of it in the Biden administration, projecting weakness rather than strength. So he has their attention. The Iranians and their proxies, they know what they're going to get with President Trump, which is there's literally hell to pay if you mess with him, and that's why I think they're immediately reacting in a different way. So I think President Trump is on the right track and trying to tamping down that threat, and it's in America and Israel's best interest that he does so.
Everybody knows that Vandenberg is a foreign policy organization, but most people who have been to our events also know that I have a particular fascination with an interest in the idea of civics education and how critical that is to building a patriotic population, building a population that understands what American leadership is. So you've served on the Workforce and Education Committee. I will say there's something, to put it mildly, deeply wrong with our universities. And this was something that you focused on when you were a congressman before you were a senator. So how do you think that this anti-American ideology, because we talk about anti-Semitism, but it's really anti-American ideology, has spread so much on campuses? And what is the role of foreign adversaries in promoting that?
Well, we know they're directly involved, but I think you and I have talked about this before. There's so much to unpack with this. It was three years ago, the Wall Street Journal published a poll. I cite it often, but right around 2000, 2001, before September 11th, the Wall Street Journal poll showed that something like 70% of Americans consider themselves to be patriotic. Being patriotic means you love your country. 3 years ago, that same poll published in the Wall Street Journal said that somewhere around only 40% of Americans consider themselves to be patriotic. And I contend to you that no great country can survive or sustain itself if less than half of your people don't consider themselves to be patriotic and love their country. So what happened on Election Day, November 5th, right? President Trump wins the election, and Army recruitment. I talked to Chief of Staff of the Army. He said on Election Day, it wasn't in December, it wasn't on January 20th. On Election Day, they immediately see, and in the days right after Election Day, immediately see a spike in recruitment in the Army. And right now, we have the best Army recruitment numbers that we've seen in 15 years. Navy's the best in 20 years. Under Biden, we had the worst recruitment crisis that we've had in the all 50 years of an all-volunteer force. I think this is all directly related. I mean, how do you inspire the next generation to do what I did and many of you did, to raise your right hand, to take an oath, knowing that when you do so, you might pay the ultimate sacrifice for your country when you take that oath if less than half of our country doesn't love our country enough to do that. So it's not sustainable. And a lot of this is deeply rooted, I believe, in the elite universities in America that teach this ideology. And we saw that bleed into even K through 12 schools over the last 4 years, and critical race theory and these other dangerous ideologies that were taught to young grade school kids. Even on Dodea military schools, they were teaching some of this garbage. So it's dangerous. We shouldn't put up with it. And President Trump is signing all of these executive orders to get DEI and anti-Americanism off of publicly funded college campuses and out of our schools, and leveraging federal money to do that. And I think that there's a lot of good that comes with that, but we have a mission, even in the years to come, post-Trump, to rebuild that patriotic core in our country, or our country will never survive.
I want to dive into some of what you shared on your remarks about China and Pentagon issues, defense industrial base issues. But before I do, the one thing that I think your voting record diverges from where Vandenberg's positioning has been on the issue of Ukraine, funding of Ukraine. You have been very forceful in your advocacy that Russia is a threat, so that has not been a part of it. You used the phrase just and lasting peace when you spoke about the what's going on in Ukraine. I think part of some people's fears about the Trump administration is, you could have a deal, but will it necessarily result in a just and lasting peace? So how would you kind of define just and lasting, and what do you hope is the outcome of this negotiation process?
We have to be realistic about it, and I think President Trump his rhetoric has been tough on Zelensky, but his rhetoric lately has been very tough on Putin as well. And I think at some point years from now, we'll read books about Trump era foreign policy, and maybe there will be distinctions between him and Reagan era foreign policy. I think they're rooted in the same place, but in trying to bring both sides to the table, when you negotiate a deal like this, it's a recognition that both sides aren't going to get with everything that they want. I mean, I think it's naive to believe that Russia doesn't win some territory. I don't want that to be the outcome, but they can't they have to walk away from the deal not feeling satisfied too, and knowing that there will be hell to pay if they break the terms of those, whatever that deal might be. So I don't know what that will be, but I know President Trump is very focused on it. I said it in my remarks, though, and in my heart, this is what I really believe, that $37 trillion in debt, a diminished America, especially after Afghanistan, but much more than that. We can't play that role in the world that we've historically played with those dynamics here at home. And President Trump is taking that approach when it comes to economic and trade policy, try to rebuild America, rebuild our Made in America economy, keep those good jobs for the American people, and resurge America so that we project that strength abroad, and we back Putin and other bad actors off around the world and scare them away from situations like these. So I think we have to take a step back and be realistic about it, and that explains the position that I've had over the last 4 years. I mean, I will say, I was at the Munich Security Conference with Senator Graham when I was in the House right before Putin invaded Ukraine, but at that point it appeared to be imminent. But weeks before that was the deadly, disastrous, embarrassing withdrawal from Afghanistan. And that moment was in every room, every bilateral discussion that I had with Senator Graham and defense ministers and prime ministers and leaders from allied countries and countries that were less of an ally to America, and we had a dozen different meetings with different countries. The Afghanistan debacle was the black cloud that hung over every room, and it weakened America in the eyes of our allies and certainly our adversaries. And I think President Trump reasserting America and making America strong again is the long-term solution.
Yeah, it reminds me, I had a conversation with a foreign diplomat who said, the image of America's military used to be storming the beaches of Normandy. Now it's the fall of Kabul. And that is a very sort of, I think, compelling difference, and also affects Americans and whether they want to serve in the military, whether they want to serve the country. You mentioned being in favor of an increase in defense spending. We obviously very strongly support that as well. One of the main criticisms of increasing defense spending is, of course, the fact that we're already so much in debt, and this is already a significant part of our budget. So there is this issue of waste and fraud within the Pentagon's budget. You sort of spoke of Congress as a potential solution here. Respectfully, I think it's been an impediment so far, just in terms of the fact that everybody has sort of their pet projects for their district, and there's a lot of legacy programs that should probably be cut, but there's some representative somewhere, not in Indiana, of course, who wants, to fund some of their programs. So how do you see us breaking through this perennial issue to make sure that we get the Pentagon the higher top line that it really needs, while also addressing these concerns about waste and fraud?
Well, I don't know if there's ever been a more exciting time or more of a innovative approach that a president has taken to the Pentagon than President Trump. I mean, you have private equity guys, you have innovators, you have Silicon Valley is more engaged at the Pentagon than they've ever been since I've been in Washington, D.C. And I think this is really important. President Trump's taken this, whether it's Secretary Driscoll at Army. I mean, he comes out of the private equity world. You've got the Deputy Secretary, obviously coming out of that world, and then you have key players from Palantir and Anduril and some of these major innovators. Not to mention you have Elon Musk, who's in the background and playing a major role in everything that's going on at the White House. I hope he will be for a long time to come, even when he completes his efforts with DOGE. Having him around as one of these disruptors and innovators and someone in the background to completely shake up the Pentagon and its approach to innovation. I think this is really important. So that's a big part of it. Secondly, this reconciliation bill that we're marking up right now, and there's synergy between the House and the Senate Armed Services Committee. I mean, it's already baked. The deal is baked between the two committees. The House marked it up this week. Was it $150 billion in instant funding for priorities? Going to be a big boost in Indiana to Crane and companies like L3 Harris that makes weather weather satellites, makes space satellites, is going to benefit from this when we build the Golden Dome and investments in those priorities. That's significant. And then you have a president for the first time ever talking about $1 trillion defense budget. I mean, he believes in this. He wants this because he understands that this is peace through strength. Is modernizing the military. All that being said, that big of a boost, especially in the reconciliation bill, $150 billion, means that the audit has to happen. It has to happen faster. And I think most Republican senators who I talk to understand that if we're funding that boost and funding that budget, then the audit has to be a higher priority, and we're going to be pushing for it.
You mentioned, you referenced the sort of arsenal of democracy and the role that Indiana played in that during World War II. There's questions about whether or not we can actually achieve the same thing. I think we went from being 39th largest military in the world to the largest within a span of 2 or 3 years at that time. When you think about our strategic priorities, you laid out a few of them, but what are the sort of most essential things that you think this administration and Congress needs to focus on in terms of our defense?
Yeah, it has to be AI, it has to be quantum, it has to be the race of the future. So, and this is in Indiana. We built the ecosystem for hypersonics. Obviously, the Chinese are beating us in hypersonics in a big way. But in Indiana, with partnerships between Notre Dame and Purdue University and Crane, we have the what was it called, Jeremy? The Joint Hypersonics, Adam, at Crane. We got the new office there for hypersonics, and so we built the ecosystem in Indiana. And one of the big reasons why is because I've dedicated the last 6 or 7 years engaging with Silicon Valley innovators and bringing them to Indiana. Many of them, Palmer Luckey had never been to Indiana before, and he came to Indiana in his Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops, and he fell in love with it. And he bought a rocket fuel company at Purdue. He started engaging with GM and AM General, talk about autonomous military vehicles, and it's because Indiana we're the top manufacturing state per capita in the country. We make things. So bring the innovators from the coast to the heartland, and you realize that we have the ecosystem to solve those problems in a big way. And I've dedicated much of my time on the House Armed Services Committee, now in the Senate, to try to marry that approach.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and in some ways, I don't know if it'll be the easiest question or the hardest question. You know, as you look back your 4 terms as a congressman, you're just starting out as a senator. Hopefully, you'll be a senator for many, many years. What do you hope your personal sort of legacy within the Senate to be?
I think it lies in all of this. I mean, personally, in a parochial way, but I think it matters to all of us. Crane is the largest naval base in the country, right? Acreage-wise. But it's probably a base that most of you have never heard of. But the innovation that's happening there, whether it's hypersonics or a lot of the other important work that's going on there, its vicinity to Indiana University, my alma mater. So building up these institutions and partnerships between the private sector, the higher education, and the military in my home state, again, we solve a lot of those problems. But you know, I've talked about the importance of in the new Republican Party, the working class and these manufacturing jobs, the defense industrial base. I mean, it all works together. And you know, I want my legacy to be the senator from Indiana that protects that and grows that and secures America in the meantime.
Well, Senator Banks, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.